sort of introducing things. My name's Rachel. I'm one of the financial advisors at Dafferns Wealth. But to do all the talking tonight, we've got my colleagues Kritesh and Pam. They're going to be doing the main parts of the session. So we're expecting to run this for about half an hour. I guess it depends on how many questions you might have as to whether we overrun a little bit, but our intention is not to. Some of you probably have got tea on the go, and we'll try and make sure that you can go off and do that this evening. With that in mind, I think it's probably best to hand over to Kritesh, who's going to sort of start the session for us. And as I say, any questions, please either shout out or drop those in the chat. Kritesh.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, everybody. So I'm one of the financial advisors at Dafferns Wealth. We just wanted to let you know that we are independent financial advisors and we are whole of market as well. So any time that we do kind of have any interaction with you guys, everything that we do is unbiased, and we are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. So rest assured you have those protections in place as well. Okay, so let's have a look at today's agenda. So today's agenda is all about looking at the end of tax year, okay, utilising all of your allowances and reliefs, and also what is changing for the next financial tax year. We want to make the most out of individual savings accounts as well, ISAs, and also making the most out of pension contributions. And also we can discuss other tax efficient investments with you this evening. And also one thing that we always say is, have you ever considered your will and estate planning options? One of the things that I always say to my clients when sitting with them, we try and go through this journey, what we call life, by accumulating our wealth and working hard. One thing we should be doing as well is protecting our assets, and also, you know, we want to make sure that we protect our next of kin or whoever you want to leave your estate to, and also not pay any undue tax when it comes to inheritance tax. So we will be discussing all of those things this evening. Next slide, please, Sophie. Okay, so let's have a look at the different allowances and reliefs that are available to you. And, you know, please, if you do have any questions, please shout out as we go along. Okay, so the first one is the savings allowance. Now, it depends on what kind of taxpayer rate that you are currently on. Now, what a savings allowance is, it allows you to have a certain amount of interest earned within the year, in the financial tax year, without having to pay any tax, okay? So when we look at the basic rate of tax, your allowance is up to £1,000, so you don't have to pay any tax. You can earn up to £1,000 in interest and you have no issues there, okay? And when it comes to the higher rate, it is slightly lower. It's actually half to 500. And if you're an additional rate taxpayer, you don't have any savings allowance whatsoever. So if you do earn any interest on any any of your savings accounts that are not within an ISA or a pension, you will be paying tax, or you will have a tax liability on that, okay? Dividend allowance, okay, so if you do run a business, you may be paying yourself some dividends, excuse me. So the dividend allowance for individuals is £2,000, okay? That doesn't matter whether you're a basic, higher, or additional rate taxpayer. Everybody's allowance is £2,000. It used to be 5,000 and now it's 2. So as you can see, the government are trying to nail down on these types of areas. I think one of the things was with COVID, you know, a lot of people prior were using a lot of their dividends. And then when COVID happened and everybody wanted furlough schemes or grants, because they were not, you know, they had kind of smaller salaries, they weren't getting what they wanted. So I think this was a method of them trying to clamp down on that. Let's have a look at the capital gains tax and an exemption amount as well. Okay, so up to and including 5th of April this year, you do have an annual exempt amount of 12,300. Capital gains tax is a tax that is put on any gain that you have on the disposal of any assets. Now, this could be from a second property that you rent out. It could be from shares. It could also be like, I've got a client of mine who's got £100,000 worth of whiskey. So I sat in that room with him and I saw all this whiskey all around, and he's looking to sell it to buy a motorhome. And I said, have you actually got any receipts for this? And he said to me, no, I bought it over the last 20, 30 years. I said, well, if you can't say how much you paid for them, then what? You'll actually have a liability on every single piece of whiskey that was in that room. So, you know, £100,000 worth of whiskey, £100,000 worth of liability in terms of testing it against the tax. Okay, so we're in the process of what you can do is when you have, if you are married, you know, you can actually say, okay, let's have a look and pass on some of that to the wife or even the partner and say, you sell this within your name and you've got 12,300, I've got 12,300, and then you can start to use those allowances. However, from the next financial tax year, the government have reduced it from 12,300 to 6,000. Okay, and then the financial tax year after that is £3,000. So they are really kind of clamping down on capital gains tax. Another allowance that you do have is the personal allowance. We always say use this when it comes, it's to do with income tax. You can earn, anybody can earn up to £12,570 in the UK without having to pay any tax on their income. Okay, so it's always good to use that up, especially if you're in retirement, if you are in a drawdown pension. We always try and utilise these allowances so that you're not having to pay the tax. Okay. One way you can, one way that you can actually increase that allowance is called a marriage allowance. So I do this with a lot of my pension clients. We actually get the marriage allowance, which is you just bring up HMRC, tell them you're married, tell them that one of you is earning less than the other. As long as you're not using the full allowance already, you can pass some of it over to your spouse. So you can actually pass up to £1,260, which is 10% of the personal allowance, and that can be transferred. And then, you know, as a basic rate taxpayer, the tax liability that you are potentially saving in the current year is £252. Okay, so these are all different types of reliefs that you can potentially use just to kind of get that tax bill coming down that little bit more. Excuse me. I don't know if you guys have heard of inheritance tax. Now, inheritance tax is a tax which is paid upon your death. Okay, so if you are so let me give you the release first and foremost. So each individual in the UK, they can pass on £325,000 each to whoever they want to when they don't have to pay any tax. The recipient doesn't have to pay any tax. Okay. Now, if you are married, okay, you can use £325,000 each to your children, for example. However, interspousal transfer, there's no tax to pay whatsoever, and the relief does carry over to the spouse. So, for example, if you've got an estate worth £650,000 between you and your spouse, you can actually pass that on to your kids without them having any inheritance tax issues. Okay, there is an additional relief that is available to you called the resident nil rate band. Now, the government introduced this for properties. Okay, so if you do have a property and it's your main residence, and you are passing that on to your kids, okay, it has to be natural successors, i.e. your kids or, you know, kind of adopted children. You get an additional £175,000 each. Now, that added to the £325,000 that you have each, you can pass on £1 million, okay? So there are different types of reliefs that you can use. One thing I would say is if you are not sure about how all of this kind of links into your current circumstances, or you want to have a bit of a chat about what you can do to potentially save some tax or make yourself a bit more, you know, kind of, you know, better in terms of your tax liabilities, then please shout out, give us a nudge, and then, you know, we can always book in a separate meeting for you. Just to let you guys know as well, we do offer our first meetings free of charge. So if you do want to have a chat with any of our financial advisors, we're more than happy to go into that for you. If we have the next slide as well, Sophie, please. Okay, so we've all kind of heard of ISAs. ISAs are individual savings accounts. Okay, the key word in this is individual. It is a personal thing. You know, you can't have it as a joint account with somebody else. Now, bar a pension, and ISA is probably the most tax efficient wrap that you can potentially use. So your ISA, you have an annual allowance in the UK of £20,000. Okay, so you can invest up to £20,000 into an ISA without having any tax issues. You can get junior ISAs. Now, junior ISA, it can be set from any point of the when the child is born, all the way up to about 16. There are kind of crossovers, but we can discuss that in a few moments. But they have an annual allowance of £9,000, which can be invested per child. Okay. Now, ISA is a great way of kind of investing and not having to pay any income tax or any capital gains tax on any of the growth within those particular schemes. There are other types of ISAs. One of those is a lifetime ISA. So we call it a LISA. You can actually pay up to £4,000 per annum, okay, each year. And then this is available to those aged 18 and 40 at the time of opening the account. Contributions being made up until the age of 50, and the bonus of 25% of that year's contributions is added on each contribution. So the bonus payment for LISA is used to purchase a first home for less than 450 or withdrawn after the age of 60. And yes, you can have more than one ISA. However, you could have 4 or 5 ISAs, okay? But the main thing is, if you are going to put any money into the ISA in the financial tax year, the maximum you can put in, doesn't matter if it's across all ISAs, is £20,000. Okay, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so what I'd like to do at this point is hand it over to my colleague Pam, who will take you through the rest of the presentation.
Lovely, thank you, Kritesh, and hello to everybody who has joined us today. So I'm going to take you through the next few slides and other options available to you to think about before the end of the tax year. And we're going to start with pensions and pension contributions. Pension contributions and pensions in general are great tax efficient saving vehicles. Why? Well, because any individual or personal contribution that you make into your pension, you will benefit from tax relief. Now, usually the pension scheme or provider will talk to HMRC and claim the basic 20% back from them. Additionally, if you are a higher rate taxpayer or an additional rate taxpayer, then you can claim a further 20 or 25% back from HMRC through a self-assessment. So, for instance, if you are paying in £100 into your pension, then automatically you would get £25 should I say, sorry, back from HMRC if you're a basic rate taxpayer, just to give you an idea. So any pension pot that you build up for your savings, just something to remember, it does stay most of the time outside of your estate, which is great for inheritance tax purposes because it's not calculated in that particular area. If you can also, not only do you have individual pension contributions, but employers can also make contributions into your pension. And for anybody who owns a business, their contributions that they make into pensions means that they save on corporation tax. So another great saving. Next slide, please, Sophie. So we've talked a little bit about pensions and the tax benefits. So how much can you actually pay into your pension? So in this particular tax year of 22-23, you can actually pay in up to £40,000 gross of any pensionable earnings, it's usually salary, or your salary if it is less. So 40,000 or the lower of your salary. So for instance, if you have a £30,000 salary, that's the maximum that you'll be able to pay into a pension. Anybody can actually pay into a pension, and you can pay into a pension until you are age 75. So if you don't have a salary, you can still pay into a pension up to £3,600 gross or £288 net per year. If you are one of those lucky people who are additional rate taxpayers, then your pension contribution, unfortunately, does taper away. So if you earn over 240,000, then the annual allowance is actually tapered away by £1 for every £2 of income that you have. So when you reach a salary of 312,000, the maximum that you can pay into a pension contribution, 5 pension contributions, is £4,000 gross or £3,000 net. And if you're in that area, it would be a really good time to actually talk to a financial advisor about what other options that you may have. If you're aged over 75, there is no tax relief available on any contributions that have made. If you do have scope to pay in extra contributions, then you can use any capacity from previous years. And if you're in that position, again, it's probably best to speak to a financial advisor so we can work out the maximum that you're able to pay in. Next slide, please, Sophie. Lovely. So another tax efficient vehicle is something called a venture capital trust. So, or VCT for short. So VCT are companies listed on the London Stock Exchange, and they are investments into small businesses that want to raise money to grow. And you can see there on the right hand side some companies that have actually benefited from being in a VCT investment. So Secret Escapes, you might have heard of, Grays, who are a big company, as well as Gusto, which are the food, you make your own recipes, Kazoo and Zoopla. It's all well-known companies, and they've all started and had help through VCT investments. So VCT investments, you can invest up to a maximum of 200,000, and you will qualify for income tax relief at 30%. So if you were to pay 10,000 into a VCT investment, you would receive £3,000 in tax relief. Additionally, there are some other benefits as well. Dividends are received tax-free, and there is no capital gains paid on any gain made when sold. However, these are high-risk investments and for the longer term, and you should always take advice before investing in this area. Next slide, please, Sophie. So very similar to VCTs, there is something called an Enterprise Investment Scheme, or an EIS. And again, you can see on the right-hand side some of the companies that have actually benefited from the EIS investments. So Mowgli are a street food restaurant company that's popping up all over. Again, Gusto, and Bloom and Wild, which is a flour company. So investments into qualifying companies of VCTs, or sorry, EISs, we have moved on. Okay, so EISs, just to give you a bit of background actually, EISs started back in 1994, and they were designed to encourage investments into small unquoted companies. So these are companies that are not listed on any stock exchange. So they are high risk investments. Again, they will qualify for income tax relief at 30%, and you have a maximum of 1 million that you can actually invest. Now that limit's actually increased to 2 million, where the investment is invested in knowledge intensive companies. So these are research companies. If the investment is held for more than 3 years, then any capital gains is generally exempt. Additionally, with EISs, if you had a gain from a different type of investment, you can use that money to invest into an EIS and defer any capital gains for as long as you actually hold the investment. And the vast majority of EISs qualify for 100% IHT, or inheritance tax relief, which is another added bonus. Next slides, please. Thank you. Other things to consider are not only just investments, but as Kritesh alluded to at the beginning, it's great to be able to increase or grow whatever assets that you have in your estate, but how do you protect them? And this is where your wills and estate planning options come into play. So some questions to ask yourself: do you have enough life cover, critical illness cover, income protection, should the worst happen? Are your family protected? Are those loved ones able to pay for any expenses on an ongoing basis whilst you are either not around or seriously ill? Do you know if you have an IHT liability? And what does that mean to you and your family? Equally, do you have an up-to-date will? And lastly, have you considered lasted power of attorneys? So who's going to take control when you don't have control? So these are all other things to consider and think about when you're looking at your finances. Next slide, please, Sophie. And I'm just going to hand back over to Rachel. Was there any questions? Sorry, I think I did see one pop up.
I did do a question on the chat, so
Oh,
if
okay.
people want to have a quick look at that.
Lovely.
Okay. But yes, are there any questions on any of the areas that we've covered? So we've looked at what are the limits and things that we can be using. We've looked at ISAs, pensions, some things that may be less familiar to, which is the VCTs and EIS. Anything that you've got questions on any of those? No? Okay. One really important bit, which Pam has just been talking about, actually, is the wills and lasting powers of attorney. And I think it's something like, the statistics are that 70% of us in the UK haven't done a will. And I think probably for many of us, it is on that to-do list if we haven't already done it. So the will is sort of a fairly obvious one, because that is sort of thinking about what happens when you're no longer here. How do we make sure that everything you've worked really hard for is passed to the right people? Because if you don't have that in place, you can have all sorts of tax issues and simply people getting what you've worked really hard for and not being the right people that you want to receive that. So there's that to consider. Lasting powers of attorney, just to make the distinction, is actually all about when you're still here. And if you've lost mental capacity, who is actually going to run your affairs? And there are two types. There's the health and welfare, which is perhaps the lesser known, and there's the finance and property. Finance and property is the one that we all think of more automatically, I think. Who's going to sort out the bills? Who's going to manage any investments? All of that kind of thing. Health and welfare, I think, has become more and more important in recent times with the situation that the NHS is currently finding itself with. I think it is very, very important now to have somebody who is a legal representative who, if you suddenly find yourself in hospital, in the care system, that actually you've got somebody who can stand up for you and sort of present what it is that you would like to happen. So if you've never considered that, that's certainly something that I would recommend having a think about. And for all of these issues, I'd encourage you to have a chat with myself, Pam, Kritesh, and you can get in contact with us. I think we've got the information coming up in a second about how you can contact us. But please do make the most of that, because we do offer an initial chat where you can sort of do that without any obligation or any charge, and we're happy to do that.
Right.
Other things that
can I just interrupt? Sorry, there's a question. Who is best placed to advise REIS or VCTs, financial advisors or platforms such as Hargreaves Lansdowne?
Ooh.
Financial advisors, I would say.
Yeah, I think all of us, you're probably asking biased people, I don't know. No, in all honesty, an independent financial advisor is going to look at everything. We take a very holistic approach. You know, I've just been talking about wills and estate planning, that kind of thing. It is looking at everything, whereas I believe a platform is literally just going to talk to you about which is the best VCT, even if I don't even know if they can go down that route, but to get advice, they can't.
They can't give advice. Yeah.
So if you want advice, if you want to sort of have somebody tell you what they think is best in your situation, then please do talk to us. The brilliant thing about VCTs and EISs is that, I mean, there's quite a number of them available now with different providers, but some of them have different focuses. So just to give you an example for any of those of you who sort of are into Formula One, there is a company, an investment company called Foresight, fairly well known in the industry, or very well known, I should say, but they have partnered up with Williams Engineering, who were part of Formula One Williams. The team sort of were born out of that. So the two companies have actually come together, and their VCTs are very much focused on that side of things, those sorts of technologies, that kind of engineering. So if you have an interest in that, that could be something that's worthwhile having a look at. Equally, there are other providers who might look at sort of pharmaceuticals and medical things. Looking at, and Kritesh, we were talking about this the other day. If you want to sort of have something that's looking into diabetes research, cancer research, there's some amazing things going on. And this is not a recommendation for everybody to go out and do a VCT or any EIS, but the reason that the government incentivizes to actually go into these areas is because it's more beneficial for the economy actually for us to directly invest in these companies, UK companies, up and coming, than actually it is for that bit of tax to have gone into the system. So if you were wondering how on earth can they give these sorts of incentives and tax reliefs, that's the reasoning behind it. But that's, as I say, it's not advice to go out and do a VCT or an EIS. They are higher risk and they may not be appropriate. So please do have a chat with us. We can give you some direction. Anything else coming up? I was just going to talk about some of the other things that actually were on the previous slide. Sorry, Sophie, I moved on a little bit quickly. So we've covered the things that you would expect us to talk about in terms of investments and pensions. But other things to be aware of, through Dafferns as accountants, there are connections with solicitors that are local to Coventry, who will be happy to sort of have a chat about wills and the estate planning side of things. But also we can sort of, if you've got any issues with mortgages, we can point you in the right direction for that as well, to get some good independent advice. So those are other areas that we can help and assist you with. Okay. Final slide, I think, again, Sophie, if that's all right, if we can finish on that one. You have got our details there. And just for absolute clarity, so you know exactly who you're talking to, if you have a chat with myself, Pam or Kritesh, we represent Dafferns Wealth via another company called Insight Financial Associates. And for a good number of years now, Insight Financial Associates and Dafferns have worked together, but we work via Dafferns Wealth. So just for absolute clarity, when you know who you're talking to and the capacity that we work in. And as Kritesh said, we are independent. So if we are having a chat with you, you are our priority. We've got no allegiance to any other company, and we certainly won't sort of discuss any personal situations outside of any individual conversation.
I have another question for you.
Lovely, thanks, Sophie.
Rachel, Pam and Kritesh, do you have areas of expertise or interest, or can we approach any of you?
That's a very good question. We are all what I call holistic or general practice. I know Pam and Kritesh have got a lot of experience in pensions, and particularly defined benefit pensions. So that's the old-fashioned, we'd all want one, the old style final salary pensions. But you know, they can talk to you about anything. I am generalist. I get quite passionate, you've probably guessed that, about VCTs, EIS and tax efficient investments, but we will talk to you about anything. So with all of these things, it's who you want to have a chat with, who you know, click
you
with,
like the face
with
off. Yes, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're happy to talk to anybody. Anything else? May I ask a question to you who have attended tonight? Has this been a useful session? I may get silence back, I don't know. Just so we know what to do for the future. If anybody's got a thumbs up reaction or anything, or if not, then please tell us how it can be improved as well, if that's the case.
And you can unmute yourselves or post in the chat.
Okay. Well, if you'd like to give feedback on the session, because we always want to improve, we want to sort of be able to do things that will meet your requirements, things that interest you, we'd be very, very grateful. If you've got any feedback for us, that'd be brilliant. But in the meantime, I think unless Kritesh or Pam, if you have anything else to add, or Sophie even?
No, nothing really.
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for your attending. I hope it's been useful, as I say, and that would be brilliant to get some feedback. And it would be lovely to talk to some of you as well in the future.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy your teams.